Your voice is fading away, especially with your own kids. Like you're offering advice that just bounces off. Or maybe the closeness you used to share feels, well, distant. You're not alone. So many of us navigate this chapter of life feeling unseen, undervalued, even like a burden sometimes. But listen, what if I told you there's a way, a really powerful way, to not just get that respect back, but to rediscover a deep, unshakable sense of peace and joy within yourself? That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to explore 6 game-changing shifts in how you think and act. We're talking ancient wisdom, practical steps, and a real-life story of transformation. Miss these insights, and you risk staying stuck, feeling overlooked. Stick around till the end, because you're about to discover how to ignite respect and find incredible joy in this part of your journey, starting right now. Let's talk about Eleanor. For decades, her world revolved around her kids. She was the rock, the wise one, always there. But as they grew up, she noticed something shifting. Calls got shorter, filled with hurried promises that never quite materialized. Her suggestions, from parenting grandkids to career moves, were met with polite nods, then quietly ignored. At family gatherings, her stories seemed to blend into the background noise of younger voices. It wasn't that her kids were being deliberately mean. In fact, they probably didn't even realize the impact. But for Eleanor, each unanswered call, each dismissed idea, chipped away at her sense of worth. It felt like all her years of experience, her accumulated wisdom, were suddenly worthless. She had poured her heart and soul into raising them, and now it felt like her voice, her very presence, was fading away. One day, during a call with her daughter Susan, Eleanor felt particularly dismissed. Susan abruptly ended the conversation, saying she was busy and would talk later. A later that never seemed to come. That moment, though small, cut deep. Eleanor replayed it in her mind, a knot of hurt tightening in her stomach. What changed, she wondered. Am I just an afterthought now? This feeling of being unvalued wasn't just an occasional event. It permeated her days, casting a shadow on what should have been a time of relaxation and enjoyment. Eleanor felt stuck in a cycle of wanting connection but fearing rejection. Little did she know, this feeling of being unvalued was the starting point of a profound self-discovery. But before Eleanor could find her way forward, she needed to understand the deeper currents at play, the nature of her own mind and attachments. The real reason you're hurting. Now, let's get a little philosophical for a second. Eastern wisdom, especially Zen Buddhism, talks about the mind as a restless monkey, constantly chattering, jumping from thought to thought, clinging to what it wants and pushing away what it doesn't. Just like that monkey finds comfort in familiar branches, our minds cling to familiar roles and expectations. Eleanor was clinging to the role of the valued matriarch, the go-to person whose opinions mattered. But, as the Buddha wisely said, your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own unguarded thoughts. Think about that. Eleanor's suffering wasn't just about her children's actions. It was about her own thoughts and interpretations of those actions. Her mind was telling her she was no longer important, that she had lost her value. These unguarded thoughts, fueled by her attachment to constant validation from her kids, were the source of her pain. Furthermore, the Buddhist concept of anatta, or non-self, teaches us that a fixed, permanent identity is an illusion. Eleanor was attached to being the respected mother, the go-to person. When this perception was challenged, she suffered. Eastern wisdom suggests that by understanding the impermanent nature of all things, including our roles in life, we can detach from rigid expectations and find greater peace. Eleanor's experience of feeling unvalued is a universal one, rooted in the mind's tendency to grasp at fleeting circumstances. But as ancient teachings reveal, true strength isn't found in clinging, but in awareness and letting go. The first step on Eleanor's path to regaining respect would be a powerful shift in her own understanding. The abrupt end to Susan's phone call wasn't just a painful interaction. It became a catalyst for Eleanor. As she replayed the conversation in her mind, something shifted. She recalled snippets from an online talk she had half listened to. The idea that the more you chase their approval, the less they respect you resonated deeply. It was like a small seed of understanding had finally found fertile ground. Eleanor began to see a pattern. Her constant efforts to please, her subtle hints for more attention, her anxiety over their infrequent calls. Could these very actions be pushing them further away? She realized that she had, perhaps inadvertently, placed her sense of worth entirely in their hands. Their validation had become her primary source of emotional sustenance, and the more she sought it, the more elusive it became. This was a profound and somewhat uncomfortable realization. It wasn't that her children were solely to blame. She had unknowingly contributed to this dynamic. This awareness, though initially painful, was the crucial turning point. It marked the moment Eleanor began to understand that the key to regaining respect might not lie in changing her children, but in changing herself. Understanding is only the beginning. The next step would require a fundamental shift in how Eleanor engaged with her children and her own life. Armed with this new awareness, Eleanor started to explore non-attachment, a cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy. It wasn't about loving her kids less, but about detaching from the need for a specific response. She started to reflect on the times she had offered advice, not out of genuine support, but out of a desire to feel needed and important. She saw how her subtle expectations of gratitude had often led to disappointment. Eleanor consciously started to shift her approach. When Mark mentioned a problem at work, instead of jumping in with solutions and feeling deflated when he didn't listen, she simply listened with empathy. She offered a gentle, "That sounds challenging," without any strings attached. Surprisingly, Mark seemed more open to talking, and later, he even asked for her opinion on a specific aspect. Eleanor realized that by releasing her attachment to him taking her advice, she had created space for genuine connection and made him more receptive to her input. She also started engaging in activities that brought her joy, independent of her children's involvement. She rejoined her book club, started taking watercolor classes, and rekindled old friendships. This wasn't about ignoring her children, but about nurturing her own well-being and finding fulfillment within herself. She began to understand that her happiness didn't hinge on their constant attention. This act of non-attachment to a specific outcome, their validation, ironically started to shift the dynamic. Her children, sensing her newfound independence and contentment, began to reach out more organically. This was just the first layer of transformation. Eleanor still needed to understand the deeper patterns in their relationship, balancing love and self-respect. As Eleanor continued her journey, she began to reflect on the history of her relationship with her children. She realized that, over the years, she had often prioritized their needs above her own, sometimes to the point of self-neglect. Driven by love and a desire to be a good mother, she had often silenced her own opinions and deferred to their preferences, even when it meant sacrificing her own well-being. This pattern, Eleanor realized, had inadvertently taught her children that her needs and feelings came second. While compassion for others is a cornerstone of Buddhist teachings, the principle of interdependence highlights the interconnectedness of all beings. Neglecting one's own well-being creates an imbalance in the delicate web of relationships. Just as a healthy ecosystem requires all its parts to thrive, healthy family dynamics require each member to have their needs acknowledged and respected. Eleanor understood that her constant self-sacrifice, while well-intentioned, had inadvertently diminished her own value in the eyes of her children. They had grown accustomed to her putting them first, and this had, perhaps unconsciously, led them to take her for granted. She wasn't suggesting they were deliberately disrespectful, but the dynamic she had helped create had inadvertently fostered a lack of reciprocal respect. This realization led Eleanor to understand the importance of balancing her natural compassion with a healthy dose of self-respect. But knowing this intellectually was different from putting it into practice, especially when it came to setting boundaries. Eleanor's newfound hobbies and rekindled friendships began to fill a void she hadn't realized existed. She found genuine pleasure in her watercolor classes, losing herself in the flow of colors and the challenge of capturing beauty on paper. Her book club provided stimulating conversations and a sense of intellectual engagement that had been missing. She realized that she couldn't solely rely on her children for validation and emotional fulfillment. Their lives were busy, their priorities were different, and that was a natural part of life. This shift in focus aligned with the Buddhist understanding of impermanence, anicca. Everything in life is subject to change, including the dynamics of family relationships. Relying on external sources like her children's constant attention for lasting happiness was a recipe for disappointment. Eleanor started to understand that true and lasting peace comes from within. By cultivating her own interests and finding joy in her own life, she was building an inner refuge, a source of happiness that wasn't dependent on external circumstances. This didn't mean she loved her children any less, but it meant she was no longer solely reliant on them for her sense of worth. As Eleanor nurtured her inner world, she noticed a subtle but significant change in how her children interacted with her. They seemed more interested in her activities, asking about her classes and book discussions. It was as if her own vibrancy had made her more engaging in their eyes. However, there was still work to be done, particularly in how Eleanor asserted her own needs and boundaries. A few weeks later, Eleanor's son David called with a last-minute request. He needed her to drive across town to pick up his dog from the vet because he had a sudden meeting. In the past, Eleanor would have immediately agreed, even if it inconvenienced her own plans. But this time, something was different. She paused, took a breath, and politely declined. She explained that she had an appointment she couldn't reschedule. This seemingly small act was a significant step for Eleanor. It wasn't about being unhelpful, but about recognizing and asserting the value of her own time. This action embodied the Buddhist principle of wise action. Setting healthy boundaries isn't about being selfish or creating conflict. It's about acting in a way that promotes well-being for yourself and, ultimately, for your relationships. It's often said, and it rings true, that people will treat you the way you allow them to. From a Buddhist perspective, wise action involves understanding cause and effect and acting in a way that leads to positive outcomes and reduces suffering, both her own and potentially her son's in the long run, by teaching him responsibility. By respecting her own boundaries, Eleanor was subtly teaching her son the importance of respecting others' limitations as well. Eleanor's firm yet kind refusal wasn't met with anger, as she had perhaps feared. Instead, David simply said, "Okay, Mom, I understand. I'll figure something else out." This positive response reinforced Eleanor's understanding that setting boundaries wasn't about creating distance, but about fostering healthier, more respectful interactions. She had begun to show her children, through her actions, that her time and her needs were valuable. But the transformation wasn't just about saying no, it also involved a shift in how she offered her support. How to help without feeling resentful. In the past, Eleanor's help often came with unspoken expectations. When Mark was struggling with a home repair, she would rush over and take over, often feeling resentful if her efforts weren't met with effusive gratitude, or if he didn't follow her exact instructions. She realized that her generosity sometimes stemmed from a need to feel needed, rather than a pure desire to help. Now, Eleanor began to practice detachment in her acts of giving. When Mark mentioned a similar problem, she offered guidance and suggestions, but refrained from immediately jumping in to fix it for him. She empowered him to find his own solutions, offering support if he genuinely needed it, but without the expectation of immediate appreciation or control over the outcome. This subtle shift had a profound impact. Mark felt more capable and respected, and Eleanor no longer felt drained or resentful. Her offers of help were now seen as genuine support, freely given without any hidden agenda. This change in how she gave also subtly shifted how her children perceived her. They no longer saw her as someone who would always drop everything to cater to their needs, but as a strong, independent individual who offered help out of genuine care. But the final piece of the puzzle lay in Eleanor fully embracing her own life and allowing that inner strength to radiate outwards. The secret to respect: letting go and living your best life. As Eleanor continued to invest in her own interests, nurture her friendships, and set healthy boundaries, something remarkable happened. She wasn't consciously trying to regain her children's respect. Her focus had shifted inward, towards cultivating her own happiness and well-being. She was no longer living for their calls or their approval. She had found a deep sense of purpose and joy in her own life. Ironically, this inner freedom and self-sufficiency made her more engaging and, yes, more respected by her children. They saw her vibrant energy, her enthusiasm for her hobbies, her strong sense of self. They started to seek her out, not out of obligation, but out of genuine interest in her life and her perspectives. They realized that their mother was not just someone who was always available to help them, but a fascinating individual with her own rich and fulfilling existence. Just like the lotus flower rises through the mud to bloom in beauty, Eleanor had navigated the challenges and found her own radiant bloom. The key wasn't to demand respect, but to embody it through living a life filled with purpose and joy. By focusing on her own inner peace and well-being, Eleanor had inadvertently created the space for genuine respect to flourish. This is the ultimate lesson. When you are truly content and secure within yourself, that strength naturally commands respect from those around you. Eleanor's journey reminds us that regaining respect isn't about manipulation or demanding attention. It's about understanding the dynamics at play, releasing our attachments, setting healthy boundaries, and most importantly, cultivating our own inner peace and fulfillment. So, where are you on this journey? Are you feeling that sting of disrespect? Or are you ready to embrace these powerful shifts? Start with one small step today. Maybe it's reflecting on your own attachments or identifying one boundary you need to set. Remember, just like Eleanor, your journey towards regaining respect and finding inner peace is a process. Be patient with yourself and celebrate every step forward. If Eleanor's story resonated with you and you found these insights helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to Moon Mind Temple for more wisdom on navigating life's challenges with mindfulness and Eastern philosophy. Share your own experiences or insights in the comments below. What's one small step you're going to take today? Let us know in the comments. We read and appreciate each one. Until next time, may you find peace and respect on your path.